Hello and welcome to airgunweb.com, your home for honest and real-world airgun reviews and information. We bring you the facts, not fluff. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. See, last month we took our AT44 QE long 25 cal, took it out of the box, went down to the range, and just put some shots through it. You know, it did pretty well. In fact, these are the groups we got at 50 yards. We had a little wind blowing, hadn't done anything to the gun. This is not too bad, but I know it could do better. So I've done a little work to the gun and nothing serious, and I'm going to actually walk you through that process today, but let's show you the results we're getting now. So this is my first shot group at 50 yards. It's definitely better, but this is what I started getting the rest of the day. This is a whole lot better. Now, there's a little bit of a trick to actually getting the shroud off properly and cleaning the barrel. There's some things you need to know so that you do it right and don't damage your rifle or need to order spare parts. That's what we're going to do today. So sit back and relax. Let's get started. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. Now, there are a couple different models of the AT44 QE variants on the market. This one actually has the screws on the top of the receiver where the front sight used to be, and that's what's holding the barrel in place. The newer models are going to have screws on the side, so on my model I've actually got to remove the scope. You may not have to do that, but we're going to walk through this whole process, show you how to go ahead and take this barrel off. Little parts you got to be really careful about, but before we get started, let's go ahead and make sure it's safe to get to work here. Remove the magazine. Go ahead and remove our air cylinder. Okay, so now there's absolutely no way the gun can accidentally discharge and cause any problems. So let's go ahead and take our scope off. Again, if you have the newer model that has the grub screws on the side, you won't have to do this. Alright, so I've got screws right here on the top. Use my Allen wrench. And this particular one actually has two sets of screws. It has an upper screw and a lower screw. So you're going to take the uppers all the way out. The models that have the grub screws on the side only have a single screw, so you don't have to do this. Okay, now we're going to loosen the inner screw. There we go. Now before we do that, let's take the shroud off. Okay, so to remove the shroud, we're going to do this first. But I think we actually need this tight for this to work right. Now what I'm going to do is take the internals out and we're going to lay them down in the order they come out in the right direction so that when we put them back, they all go back the same way. Okay. All right. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. So what we have here, we have got 4 baffles. We've got 2 plastic baffles with some type of material that helps muffle the sound, and then we've got 2 metal baffles which are just to trap the air as it comes through. Now the next part is something that if you don't know you need to do, it can give you a bit of a problem. There's a 14mm nut in there and we need to unscrew that to safely get the shroud off. So let's see if I can do this here. There we go. All right, that should be good enough. Now, the shroud just comes right off, just that easy. All right, to get that nut out, you may need one of these. This is kind of a long wooden dowel. And just like that, that is a completely dismantled shroud suppressor components. Now, what I did with my rifle before I went any further, is I took these parts, primarily I took these metal parts, and I took them over to the sink and I really cleaned them out. I just got all the debris off of them, made sure, because they came out, they were pretty gray. So take those out, completely wash those out, make sure they're really clean. You can also take a rag, go ahead and clean out the internals of your shroud here. It's less important, but getting these parts really cleaned out is actually very important. So the next thing we got to do now is we're going to remove the barrel. Now this is something you're going to need to do or potentially want to do even if you just want to clean the barrel. So let's say you don't have a QE model, let's say you have a stock AT44 or maybe even one of the BT65s, it pretty much works the same way. You're going to need to remove the barrel. Now to do that, we need to take these inner screws out, or at least loosen them up well. Okay, there's that one. And here's this one. Now, what you're going to find when you pull this apart, there are going to be two O-rings on this barrel. There we go. All right, it's nice and loose. We want to be very careful with these O-rings because if you tear them, you're going to be going to Hot Sign USA and buying some spare parts. Fortunately, they stock rebuild kits, so it's not that big of a deal if you do happen to tear one. All right, so really carefully. All right, now what you're going to want to see on this barrel, this is the centering piece or the support for the shroud. Don't lose that. What you're going to see is there's going to be two sets of grub holes here. You've got on the top where we just pulled these out, and this barrel actually would go in one of the newer models. So you'll notice these are set back a little further. So when you put this back in, make sure you're lining up the right holes, the right set of grub screws, or you could find yourself with a problem. All right, so on the end of this barrel, we've got these two O-rings here. Now, I believe they call these barrel O-rings, but you definitely want to be very careful when you reinsert this barrel, or you can nick these, and then you're not going to get the kind of velocity, and you're not going to get the kind of consistency that the gun can actually produce. The other O-ring that's very, very critical, it's one that causes a lot of problems if you don't know to look if it's there or not. There's a breech O-ring right here in the center, I mean right there in the middle. I don't know if you can see that there. I'll show it to you right there anyway. But right there in the middle, there's an O-ring, and that little guy, if it falls out or it gets blown out, or when you're cleaning the barrel, if you get very aggressive with like a bronze brush, you can catch that and pull it out before you know it, not even realize it. You put your gun back together, and all of a sudden your shots are all over the map, and you got air blowing back in your face. It's usually because that O-ring got damaged or got lost. So you can buy those at hotsignUSA.com. They sell the rebuild kits, and that's one of the parts. It is caliber dependent, so make sure that you're buying the right caliber. So once this is all apart, it's very easy to clean the barrel. I use, initially, I'll use like a bronze brush, get it good and clean, push a bunch of patches through it, and when they come out clean, then you know you're pretty much done. Now, when it comes time to put this back together, what I'm going to use is a little silicone on these O-rings to make it go back more smoothly. Make sure we don't nick them. If you don't have silicone, buy some, because you're going to need it. Okay, now I'm going to take our shroud support and add that here. Make sure I'm lining up with the right grub screws, which I am. Very carefully get that back in, and that's it. Now when you begin to tighten these down, just kind of give the barrel a little wiggle because they'll self-center. You want to make sure you kind of find the center point. That's going to make sure your transfer port is perfectly lined up, give you your best consistency and velocity. Okay, that's there. And just make sure here. Okay, get both of those screws locked down tight, and I don't have any more play in the barrel. Oh yeah, that's good to go. Go ahead and replace our top screws. That actually locks the bottom ones in place so they can't back out on you. Okay, double check. Yeah, that's tight as a drum. I have no movement at all. That's perfect. So now, take our shroud. Now on the shroud, you've got a vent hole. Now when you're putting it back on, you want to make sure the vent hole's aimed downward, because if not, it'll just blow air on you. You don't want to do that. So we'll slide this back on. It goes on pretty easily. If you start feeling like you're having to force something, something's not right, stop. Okay, now this little end cap that holds everything together, it's got an O-ring on it. So again, take some of our silicone. Just lube that up. Ooh, where we go? Here's our socket. And we will reinstall this. Just kind of spin it as you put it in. You want to be sort of careful with that. And it'll find its way. Just snug it up here. I'm using a breaker bar just because it's most convenient for me. But you don't have to. You can use a ratchet or something else. But you don't really need to put a lot of pressure on this. You just want to give it a good snug. You want to make sure that it's tight. It's not going to come loose on you. Oh yeah, that's great. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and put our baffles back in. And we're going to go start with the reverse order. Pop these guys back in here. They're in. Take this guy. When you're putting these in, make sure that the fabric stays lined up properly. If it doesn't, it can cause these to twist a little bit. All right, here we go. There we are. Now we can take our end cap. Simply screw it back on. All right, so now the shroud is back together. It's nice and definitely no movement there. That's perfect. Go ahead and remount our scope. So now that I got the scope all mounted and we're basically ready to go do some testing, let's take it out and shoot at 50 yards and see what kind of difference it makes. Now, I already know that it made a pretty significant difference, but I haven't shown you the 100-yard groups yet. Those were pretty cool too. Well, that wraps up our video today. I hope that was helpful and useful to show you guys how to take the barrel out safely and easily, and more importantly, get it back together without breaking stuff or having to go and order parts. Just be very careful with those O-rings when you're taking the barrel out and putting it back in. And also be very careful to watch that breech O-ring, because that has a tendency to grow legs and run away. Now, in my first video and some in the comments, I actually alluded to maybe working on tweaking the power curve a little bit. As I was looking at my Crony tapes, and they were very consistent, this gun is really shooting right where I want it to shoot. After full fill, it takes about 2 or 3 shots to reach the plateau, and it just sits there until it reaches the end of its, end of that power curve, and then it just falls off. And changing it really isn't going to make much of a difference, if any, and it's shooting so well, I decided really not to mess with it. At some point, maybe we'll get to that, but this rifle really doesn't need that kind of adjustment. It just needed a good cleaning. That's what we did, and we got great results. I'd like to take a moment and thank the folks over at Airgun Depot for sponsoring Airgun Web and also this video. I'd also like to thank Hatsan USA for sending us the AT44 QE Long for this video, and of course Hawk for sending us their great optics. They definitely keep us stocked well or never short of good glass to put on our guns. Now, when you're looking for airgun reviews or looking for airgun information, think Airgun Web, where we tell you the facts, not fluff. My name is Rick Utzer with AirgunWeb.com. Thanks again for watching.